Latest unemployment figures have been just released. They show that unemployment rate remains stable at 3.7% in the 3 months to November.
Yes, we're seeing the redundancy rates increase to 3.4% per 1,000 employees, in September to November, but still remains low. And the figures also show that 417,000 working days were lost because of labour disputes in November 2022. That's the highest since 2011.
Jack Kennedy's with us now. Jack's an economist at Indeed Hiring Lab, and to explain what all of this means. Jack, what do you read into this?
Yeah, the labour market remains very tight, really. We've seen some further signs of softening. We saw vacancies coming down a little bit further.
What do you mean when you say the labour market remains tight?
The unemployment rate remains historically low. It has been increasing slightly from a low of 3.5%, but it remains at just 3.7%. And we've still got very strong labour demand. So a lot of companies, a lot of employers are still finding it quite tough to bring in the staff that they're looking for.
So that leads to inflation, that leads to having to pay for the people that you want.
That's right. And we're seeing quite strong rates of wage growth, nominal wage growth at 6.4% year on year. Particularly in the private sector, running at 7.2% year on year, but in the public sector, just 3.3%. So one of the biggest gaps on record between private and public sector wage growth, which is obviously part of the background for a lot of the industrial action that we're seeing at the moment.
Interesting to distinguish between full-time and part-time employment. There seems to be this increase in part-time self-employed, but a decrease in full-time self-employed.
Yeah, so we are starting to see employers responding a little bit to the uncertain economic climate and sort of easing off the accelerator in terms of demand for full-time staff. But certainly, a lot of employers are trying to still fill staffing gaps. So certainly turning to part-time staff to
yeah, so they want it all on the cheap, basically. So, I mean, a lot of this, is this not what Brexit promised, which is, to have basically, British jobs for British people?
Well, we're certainly seeing that a lot of sectors are struggling to bring in the staff in the context of freedom of movement from the EU having ended. So, it has been difficult for some time for a lot of employers to bring in that staff. On the positive side, we are seeing, since the change in the UK's immigration rules, increased interest from outside of the EU, but that's predominantly being directed towards the higher paid, higher skilled end of the labour market.
Well, you say that, but honestly, I mean, I would find if you go into a restaurant now, if you go into a health facility or hospital, anything now, you will find people from India, people from the Philippines, people from Africa. So basically, and we're not deluding ourselves that, we stopped taking Polish people and Albanian people and Romanian people, and we simply substitute them with people from other parts of the country and there were people who would say, Brits don't want jobs that are low paid and they don't want hard work.
Well, I mean, we're seeing that a lot of the lower paid jobs have been amongst the ones seeing the fastest wage growth. So that's really been quite a defining feature of the UK labour market over the past 18 months to 2 years, really. We've seen a lot of demand across sectors like hospitality, retail, warehousing have really been having to ramp up pay to try and attract the staff that they need.
And what's been really interesting, and Eamon talking about Brits don't want to work hard, I mean, we've had the biggest problem out of the G7, haven't we, of people getting back into work after the pandemic. And it's really interesting seeing what the government's been out announcing recently to try and entice them back. So no national insurance for the first 6 months for anyone over 50, or if you're on disability allowance, don't worry, you can continue to receive a disability allowance whilst you're working. Major carrots there being offered by the government to try and get people back into the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. That's certainly been one of the key factors holding back labour force participation, is that withdrawal of older over 50s workers from active labour force participation. So certainly from a policymaker's perspective, trying to entice those people back is going to be key to addressing a lot of these long-standing hiring challenges for employers. But I think we're going to need a lot more also on the employers' front in terms of supporting and offering greater flexibility, because we know a lot of older workers want flexibility, including the ability to work remotely, but also around hours and shift patterns.